Hey guys, welcome to my channel, either for the first time or if you're a returning viewer or one of my wonderful subscribers, welcome back. My name is Shanika, but I do go by Neek, so you can call me Neek. And I do have a prophetic word for you guys that is talking about, as you can tell from the title, covenant connections and relationships. So I'm going to get right into this message. Do stick around, and I pray that you enjoy the word. Okay, so God gave me this message on today, which is March the 30th. It's Sunday, March the 30th. And I woke up and He put the phrase covenant connections within my spirit. Now, I'm familiar with what a covenant is and what connections are. But when I heard it as covenant connections, I honestly didn't know what God meant, what He was talking about. I did not know exactly what God meant by a covenant connection. So I took it upon myself to go online and see what I could find about covenant connections. But I could immediately hear in the spirit God just telling me not to do that, to turn to Him instead of turning to what I could find online, to turn to Him, because He was going to reveal what this meant and what this message was about. So the title of this message is called Covenant Connections. Now, some of you, just like me, may be curious about what exactly this means, because you yourself likely know what a connection is and you know what a covenant is. But what is God referring to when He's talking about a covenant connection in reference to this message? So these connections are connections ordained, orchestrated, and willed by God to bring forth a promise or promises God has for you in the covenant He's in with you. So this is what a covenant connection or relationship would be. And let me say that again. It's basically a connection that is ordained and willed by God due to His covenant with you. So it's to bring forth a promise that He has in covenant with you, okay? Now, just mentioning what a covenant in general is, it's a binding agreement that two or more parties come into, which will outline certain obligations, promises, or responsibilities. So just a few examples of covenants in general. Marriage is one example. That's a form of covenant. And then you have real estate covenants, where you have a agreement that is established between the buyer and the seller. And then we also have the biblical examples of covenants that were made between God and certain people, and then God and humanity. And for example, one biblical covenant would be the promise that God made to Noah that God would never flood the earth again. So this was an example of a biblical covenant. And then ultimately we have the covenant that God made with humanity. And that leads to my next point. So we, as children of God, are in covenant with God. Each of us are in covenant with Him. Now, God did not instruct me to go into details and to really teach on this in particular. But as you know, each of us are in covenant with God. And one of the ultimate forms of covenant was what was brought about through Jesus Christ, right? So, again, we are in covenant with God. Now, with that being said, because of the covenant we are in with God, God has made certain promises. He's made promises to each of us. Each of us are in relationship with Him. And in that relationship, God has established certain promises for each of our lives. He has communicated or shared or revealed those promises to us. You, as a child of God, hear from God, so you know what God has revealed to you. You know the promises that He has spoken in your life or over your life. So there are certain promises that God will fulfill in covenant with you, okay? These, of course, require your obedience and your willingness to do what God instructs you to do. But you are in covenant with him, and under that covenant, there are certain promises that God has for you in particular. Now, with that being said, some of these promises, in order for them to come to pass, they will require someone else. They simply cannot come forth and come to pass with you alone. And an excellent example of this is just marriage. Going back to my original example, in marriage, you at some point have to eventually connect with your future spouse. So God will will this connection. God will will you meeting them and have it orchestrated in some form of way. But this is an example of a promise that God may have spoken for your life. If he has spoken that you will be a husband or you will be a wife, at some point you have to meet your future spouse. And so this connection is a connection that will bring forth the promise of marriage. So quickly just recapping all of what I just said, you're in covenant with God, but what God is getting ready to do is establish these covenant relationships and connections between you and someone else. And this is a result of him bringing to pass the promises that he has given you or that he has for your life because of the covenant he is in with you, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully I explained that well. So some of you are getting ready to enter into these covenant connections or relationships, because I think I added relationships in the title. That's what I planned to do, but if it's not there, oh well. But some of you are getting ready to enter into these covenant connections and relationships. For some others of you, you have already entered into these newly covenant connections and relationships. So basically, there's two groups of people. There's the group of people who will be entering into these relationships and connections. And then there's a group of people who have already entered into these relationships and connections, but in a new sense. So this is something brand new and something fresh, not something that has been occurring for years. This is something new. So this is what God means for this message when he is referring to covenant connections. So it's a connection that will be established because you are in covenant with him, okay? And these connections will bring forth some promise that he has for your life. So now that I've explained what a covenant connection is, let me tell you what some of these connections will be for. So the purpose of them. Some of these connections and relationships will be for the purpose of business, marriage, mentorship, ministry, fulfilling a calling of leading certain people towards salvation, entry into or using your God-given gifts, or elevation of those gifts. So when I say entry into, meaning you just starting the process of using your God-given gifts, okay? And then again, I said elevation of those gifts. And then for Christian brotherhood or sisterhood and friendships, growth in your faith journey and spiritual relationship. So furthering your knowledge of God and Christ. And God stopped right there with putting different examples within my spirit, but these connections and relationships will be established for some of these purposes, okay? But as you know, this list could go on and on and on according to what God is doing in each person's life and in each individual's life. There's something that he's bringing to pass in each of his children's lives. So this list could go on and on and on. Now, I recently shared a message that still puts a big smile on my face, talking about special beginnings and how God is releasing these different special beginnings throughout the kingdom. So I'll include that message in the comment section. I'll pin it or something. But these special beginnings will be a start of something that God is doing new or different, right? Now, this is a form of a special beginning. So for those of you who that word was for, this is connected to that word. These covenant connections will be a form of a special beginning for you. Now, I do have to mention this warning that for some of you, not all of you, but for some of you, these connections and these relationships will be basically blessings in disguise. So initially, they may not seem like the best. They may not feel like the best. You may even question if it was done by the hand of God, but ultimately, God is going to bring things together for the good to fulfill a promise that He does have for your life. And the example that God gave me for this, or that He put within my spirit, was the story of Joseph and his connection with Potiphar and Potiphar's wife. So for this story, Joseph was connected to both Potiphar and Potiphar's wife, but this ultimately led to him being thrown into prison when Potiphar's wife falsely accused Joseph. But while Joseph was in prison, he connected with Pharaoh's cupbearer. And so he interpreted the dream of Pharaoh's cupbearer. Now, he basically let the cupbearer know that he was going to be restored back to his position. And when he did, to make sure that he remembered Joseph. And so this eventually came to pass. The cupbearer was restored back to his position. And Pharaoh started to have these bad dreams. And none of his people were able to interpret these dreams. So the cupbearer was brought to remembrance of Joseph. So this led to Joseph connecting with Pharaoh to interpret these troubling dreams that Pharaoh was having. So Joseph was able to interpret Pharaoh's dreams, and Pharaoh was really impressed with this, impressed with his knowledge and his wisdom and whatnot. And so Pharaoh ended up putting Joseph in the position of second in command of Egypt. So ultimately, this led to Joseph being in a certain position. That all started with his connection to Potiphar. All right, so when I say that some of these connections will be blessings in disguise, initially they may not appear to be the best thing. They may not feel the best, but ultimately God's will be fulfilled in these connections, and His promise is going to come to pass, and it will work out for your good. Make sure you are taking care of these connections, these relationships, and these people. These connections and relationships are going to lead to one of God's promises for your life being fulfilled. So because of that, one of the things that you can do in obedience is to care for these relationships and to care for these connections. So with that insight, just be wise about how you care for these connections and relationships and these people. And so the last thing that I have for you guys is scripture. But let me tell you how this came about. Let me tell you what happened. So I asked God, after He had given me the message, I asked God I always ask God, like, is there anything else you have to say or reveal or scriptures or whatnot? So I had asked God, was there any scriptures that He wanted me to share with you guys? So I first heard King David. I heard King David's name and heard chapter 13. So I went to the book of Samuel. I went to 1 Samuel chapter 13 because I had heard in spirit chapter 13. And in the book of Samuel, David is talked about. I know God had said King David in spirit. So again, I went to 1 Samuel chapter 13. And immediately Saul's son, Jonathan, stood out. When I started reading through chapter 13, Saul's son, Jonathan, stood out. So I knew that God was bringing my attention to the covenant relationship that Jonathan and King David had, right? So David made a promise to Jonathan, and we read about this in 1 Samuel chapter 20, verses 14 through 16, and it says this: "And may you treat me with the faithful love of the Lord as long as I live. But if I die, treat my family with this faithful love, even when the Lord destroys all your enemies from the face of the earth." So Jonathan made a solemn pact with David, saying, "May the Lord destroy all your enemies." And so we see that in 2 Samuel chapter 9, verses 1 through 13, that King David actually honors this promise that he makes to Jonathan. So this scriptural passage is the verse that God has me to share with you guys. So I'm going to read it. If I mess up any of the names, I apologize ahead of time, but I'm going to do my best. I think I'll be okay, but in case I mess up names, I apologize. One day, David asked, "Is anyone in Saul's family still alive? Anyone to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" He summoned a man named Ziba, who had been one of Saul's servants. "Are you Ziba?" the king asked. "Yes, sir, I am," Ziba replied. The king then asked him, "Is anyone still alive from Saul's family? If so, I want to show God's kindness to them." Ziba replied, "Yes, one of Jonathan's sons is still alive. He is crippled in both feet." "Where is he?" the king asked. "In Lodabar," Ziba told him, "at the home of Machir, son of Amiel." So David sent for him and brought him from Machir's house. His name was Mephibosheth. He was Jonathan's son and Saul's grandson. When he came to David, he bowed low to the ground in deep respect. David said, "Greetings, Mephibosheth." Mephibosheth replied, "I am your servant." "Don't be afraid," David said. "I intend to show kindness to you because of my promise to your father, Jonathan. I will give you all the property that once belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will eat here with me at the king's table." Mephibosheth bowed respectfully and exclaimed, "Who was your servant that you would show such kindness to a dead dog like me?" Then the king summoned Saul's servant Ziba and said, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and servants are to farm the land for him to produce food for your master's household. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, will eat here at my table." Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Ziba replied, "Yes, my lord, the king, I am your servant, and I will do all that you have commanded." And from that time on, Mephibosheth ate regularly at David's table, like one of the king's own sons. Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah. From then on, all the members of Ziba's household were Mephibosheth's servants, and Mephibosheth, who was crippled in both feet, lived in Jerusalem and ate regularly at the king's table. So for one, I love that story. I always love to read that story, to hear about it when it's referenced, because it just goes to show that when God puts you in the mind and the heart of certain people, woo, my goodness, it can shift things, it can change things. God brought Mephibosheth to remembrance in Jonathan's spirit and in his heart. And in King David's spirit and in his heart. And David was ultimately able to actually fulfill this promise that he had made to Jonathan like years ago. So we see the importance, for one, of this special relationship that was formed between Jonathan and David. But what God really highlighted is that in reference to these connections that will be made, and in reference to these relationships that will be established, these are in some way also going to extend beyond just you and the other person, or beyond just the two people or the two parties, and it's gonna bless other people. So in this example, we saw that the relationship that Jonathan and David had extended to Jonathan's son, and then that extended to Mephibosheth's son, and so forth. So these connections that God is going to be forming is not going to just benefit you and the other person or the two parties. It's also going to extend to other people, so that in some kind of way, God will be bringing forth blessings beyond just who you are connected with and who you have formed that relationship with. So these relationships will bless others as well. And an example of that, since I've been using this example throughout the message, I'll go back to marriage. Your marriage won't be just for the benefit of you and your spouse. God will also use your marriage to bless other people, or to bless the kingdom in whatever way he wills or he plans to do that. All right, y'all, that is the end of this message, speaking about covenant connections and relationships. So again, remember, I mentioned that there are two groups. Some of you are getting ready to experience this, but some of you have already formed these connections. These are newly formed connections. And this is what God will be doing through those connections. One of the purposes that I mentioned, God will bring that to pass through this connection, okay? I pray that you guys enjoyed the message. I pray that you take care of these connections, take care of these relationships, and do what it is God tells you to do in reference to them, okay? Do me a tremendous favor and give this video a thumbs up if you did enjoy it, if it spoke to you in some form of way. And share it with someone else if you believe that someone else should hear this word. A special thank you and shout out to my subscribers. Hey, y'all. But if you are not one of my wonderful subscribers, I would love for you to join me, join the family. As no, I didn't mention this actually. I do share encouraging words, prophetic messages, whatever God puts within my spirit to share with you guys. That is what I do, and I enjoy doing it. So I would be happy for you to join me and join this journey with me. If you feel led to sow into this word, or just sow in general, you can find that information in my description box. You can also find information on how to contact me via email if you would like to submit a prayer request or just tell a testimony or anything along those lines. You can find my email in the description box. Okay, y'all, I love you. Take care of yourself. Take care of these relationships, and I will see you on the next one.